when we work through that. But welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today at Net Zero. Just a reminder that this session will be recorded, and the recordings will be available 3 weeks after the event. We've got the chat box open. There's an icebreaker in there if anybody wants to chime in or add thoughts, or just get the conversation started as the speakers are sharing with us today. We will be monitoring it, but depending on how active it is, I may or not be able to keep up with everything. So be patient with me, but definitely get your thoughts out there. We'll get to them at some point. So I started with that question because I'm just always curious what brought people to this space. And I can tell a lot of these memories you're all sharing are really positive memories of nature and wildlife, although, you know, a few in there, like seeing trees cut down. I think both the positive and negatives, it's what brings us to this work and what keeps us persistent, even as things are really challenging. So I imagine some of those things are what bring you here today, and glad to have you with us. So we've got 3 excellent speakers with us today. Carly will be joining us shortly, hopefully. And they're going to be talking about nature in the context of net zero. So with biodiversity taking a spot on the main stage since COP15 last December, I'm sure that many of you are wondering how to integrate your net zero and nature positive strategies. How do we make sure that our carbon solutions are also having positive impacts on the overall ecosystem, the environment, the wildlife that call those places home? So in this session, we're going to cover the what, the why, and the how around valuing nature as an asset, rather than solely as a resource to be extracted. We'll be exploring some questions like, what can we expect from natural climate solutions in a net zero context? Why should companies and investors mobilize funds for nature? And how can you center nature in your net zero strategy? Because we're meeting virtually today, our presenters very graciously offered to experiment with a little bit of a different format. So we're going to be using a Pechakucha style format, basically where each of the speakers will have 20 slides, and on each slide only spend 20 seconds. So it's going to be a little bit faster paced than a typical presentation, and really meant to be conversational. So it's going to move quick, just some brief talking points and images to go along with it. After they present kind of their frameworks and some of these concepts, we'll go into a panel discussion where we get to ask the speakers some questions and go into a little bit more detail. So with that, I'd like to, actually, I'm going to share my screen first, and then I'll introduce our speakers. All right. So today we have with us Julia Carbone, Director of Natural Climate Solutions Alliance at WBCSD. Carly Sevilla, hopefully will be coming online. Oh, there you are, Carly. Yeah, you made it.
I'm here now.
Nature-based solutions specialist at ERM. And Edit Kiss, co-founder and chief commercial officer at Integrity Global Partners. And I'm your moderator. My name is Alex Navarro, and I am senior manager of nature for GreenBiz. So we're 5 minutes in, and we're going to jump into presentations. So we will start with Carly. And as soon as I hit go, Carly, we're going to start with the 20-second format. So go for it.
All right, and I'll assume you can hear me okay, see me okay now. Nothing like some tech issues to get the blood pump in before presentation. So thank you so much for having me today, Alex. Wonderful to be here with Edit and Julia. It's going to be a wonderful presentation. So excited to talk to you all about nature as more than just a net zero asset. So happy to get rolling here today. We'll start first just with a quick overview of what I do at ERM. We work on nature positive corporate strategy all the way from TNFD and disclosures back to natural climate solutions, which will really be a focus of our presentation today. And so we take a holistic approach to these topics, making sure that when you work with us, you're working with experts that are local that can really implement meaningful action. Valuing nature as an asset, not solely a resource, is crucial to business resiliency. What does this mean? Well, we'll get into it more today, but it's important to understand that when we're talking about nature as an asset, it's not just a matter of avoiding risk or avoiding loss. It's also about building opportunities. In a world where we are facing a dual crises of climate change and biodiversity loss, things are changing quickly, and these motions, these activities that are happening in this space, these physical changes are not only important individually, but they're very much connected. I'm sure that's not a surprise to anyone who's joining this session, is that these forces are inextricably linked. They're driving a very fast pace of change, both in our physical world and in our corporate spaces. So we know that similar to climate, nature is moving, but it's moving much faster. We have new frameworks, new disclosures, new commitments, new expectations for businesses in this space, and the pace of change is rapid. We understand, as I mentioned earlier, that the loss of ecosystem services is very important to our economic stability, 44 trillion of economic value generation is moderately or highly dependent on nature and its services. So we understand that when we lose those services through climate change, through nature loss, what we're really seeing is a loss in global GDP, which has been estimated to reach up to 225 billion as soon as 2030. This is right around the corner. So thinking back to that element of urgency, that element of change, this is not something that's far in the distance. It's right here, it's right now. So how can we not only protect ourselves from those loss and those material risks, which are shown in this a bit scary imagery, isn't it? Wildfires that I took this picture just yesterday as I was driving through the American Midwest. I wanted to show you this to highlight, especially for all of those in North America, what exposure to climate and nature risk actually looks like. And this means not only to your communities, to nature, but to your business. It's not just about risk though, right? We're coming back to this concept of nature as an asset. Nature smart policies could actually lead to an increase in global real GDP to the order of 150 billion. So we're not talking about just risk of loss. We're talking about opportunity creation. This has actually been estimated at a total of up to, I think, 10 trillion annually and 395 million jobs by 2030 in this Scaling Investments in Nature paper from last year. Investing in nature positive outcomes can create business opportunities, and that's really what we're going to focus on today. It has to be done carefully, it has to be done credibly, but we can capture those opportunities, we can capture that value from a business, a community, and nature perspective. So dual crises calls for a dual solution, that is nature-based and natural climate solutions, where we're investing in the protection, the restoration, and the sustainable management of natural and modified ecosystems. And I love this little mangrove picture because it really highlights that. It's next door. And this picture too is intended to sort of bring nature back home. I know when we think about carbon credits, that can feel a little abstract, it can feel kind of far away. But carbon credits can be in any setting, and nature-based solutions should be in every setting, especially in urban environments where we need to increase our ecological connectivity. It can also be in industrial areas or pollinator-friendly solar systems where we're layering assets between habitat, between renewable energy to really maximize the value of these properties, benefiting not only nature and people, but the climate as well. So being creative in the way we implement these projects. That said, we always want to put the community first, right? None of these projects can really be truly successful and sustainable if we don't put the community first, their priorities first, their input in the planning process, not just afterwards. It's not just, oh, what do you think about this after we've already done our permitting? It's engaging early and often with communities. It's also understanding that nature is very local. It's not quite like carbon, which is 1 for 1 to some extent. Carbon is atmospheric, 1 ton, 1 credit. Simple enough, maybe. Biodiversity is different, nature is different, people are different. And so we need to make sure that as we learn from the carbon markets, we learn from climate and sustainability, that we're making sure to also focus on what is important, what is different about nature. So NBS as inclusive, transparent, and empowering. This is a criteria from the IUCN Global Standard. It's one that I like to elevate because it really does demonstrate or illustrate the importance of people in planning. This is an example of a project with a client I'm working with, CPS Energy in San Antonio, where they're doing just that. They're looking to create ecological restoration in their hometown, their home city. And this is a map where we've done a screening exercise to identify priority locations where people and nature are most needed. In addition to looking at their own properties, they also found a partnership with the San Antonio Arboretum, where they're repurposing what was an old golf course currently sitting there, doing nothing much of anything, into a beautiful arboretum that will contribute not only to community, to education, to the relationship between this utility company and the places that it serves, but also provide carbon capture, which is what we're exploring with them. Carbon's not easy. We know carbon credits aren't easy, and nature's not going to be easy either. But it's important that we look at these criticisms, we look at these maybe issues that we've seen in the past, and we learn from them, we move forward from it. So taking these headlines that maybe would turn you away from nature and understanding that in all reality, without nature, there is no path forward to a climate safe future. We have to work with nature. We have to elevate nature and elevate the communities that interact with nature in order to reach a climate safe state in the future. And so when you do this, when you deliver with credibility and integrity, as Julia and Edit will get into in more detail, you can really deliver nature-based opportunities or nature-related opportunities as TNFD frames it. And those can be business performance opportunities or sustainability opportunities, but they range from access to new markets, maybe like biodiversity credits, capital flow and financing, or just sustainable use of natural resources. So the story here is really that nature is an asset. It's not just a resource to be used. It's not just a credit to apply to net zero. It's so much more than that. And in our next presentation, I'll pass it to, I believe, Edit or Julia's next step to talk about how this really looks from a financial perspective and in the carbon market. So thank you very much, Alex. I'll pass the mic over to my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Carly. How did it feel doing the 20-second slides?
A little rushed, but I hope you felt the enthusiasm behind it.
Yes, thank you. Next up, we have Edit. So take us away.
Thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon. A pleasure to be joining all of you today from boiling hot London. My name is Edit Kiss, as Alex already introduced me. I'm co-founder and chief commercial officer of Integrity Global Partners. We are a mission-driven new venture launched earlier this year with the mission to unlock capital at scale to finance nature-based solutions. So let's take a quick look at the current state of play. As you can see on this chart, in terms of investments, investors, governments, and corporate activity, there is unfortunately a lot of blah blah and not so much action happening. In terms of the numbers, if we look at the latest State of Nature Finance report, while we explains that while nature-based solutions offers 30% of the cost-effective mitigation options by 2030, and as Carly mentioned, there is no 1.5 degree without nature, it only receives 2% of global climate finance today, and only 17% of finance is dedicated to NBS comes from the private sector. So that leaves us with a staggering $520 billion annual gap. And an even scarier picture is that we are actually spending twice as much on nature destruction today. So there is not a level playing field. Nature positive is really starting from way below. However, on the positive side, the voluntary carbon market, which is a conduit for voluntary corporate climate action, has shown a strong momentum in the past years, and it has been really fueled by the nature sector. In 2021, the market has experienced a record growth and reached $2 billion on the market and around $10 billion in terms of the investment value. However, unfortunately, since around mid last year, the market has experienced a significant slowdown due to the lack of confidence in the market integrity and the lack of clarity around the claims and demand side, and all these media revelations, as Carly again mentioned that. And this resulted in a buying freeze and accumulation of over 800 million tons of inventories that are now becoming stranded assets and depressing the price. So without doubt, the voluntary carbon market is today at an inflection point, and we need to transition from this first phase to the next phase of the market. And this transition is not going to be linear. We believe that there will be a bifurcation of the price towards higher quality credits trading at a higher price and lower quality credits at a lower price. But the good news is that we already have all the solutions to and all the pathway to create the next generation high quality NCS projects. It's going to take some time to generate those credits, but we have all the tools in the toolbox. For example, we have advanced Earth observations and GIS technologies available now to design really high integrity, high accuracy baselines and also implement real-time digital MRV, which is key for the next generation projects for technical robustness and credibility. We also have a lot of advancements on the biodiversity side in terms of impact measurements, eDNA, bioacoustics, AI link camera traps, just to mention a few. And these will be also critical to start generating, hopefully, biodiversity credits in the future. There are also new quantifiable SDG impact outcome methods, such as the W+ gender credits from Bocan, which offer quantification and certification methods for benefiting women groups in the domains of time savings, incomes and assets, knowledge and education, health, food security, and leadership. So this offers a really interesting bundling opportunity also with carbon credits. And finally, not last but not least, we also have significant progress on below carbon on soil science. For example, this is a tool from C4ICRAP, one of the leading scientific organization on soil science, that provides all the KPIs we need for soil health and land degradation improvements. So how to make nature more just than just carbon, just the net zero assets? We strongly believe that we have to move to a holistic landscape investment approach, where carbon is just a catalyst to help with the sustainability transition, but to not become the end goal itself. It has to be embedded in the local economy, benefiting the local communities, and that will result in a permanent transformation. How do we get there? How do we scale this market? First of all, we need, and I'm waiting for our next slide, government to create a conducive regulatory framework and clear carbon rules for foreign investments that will not only attract investors, but will also fairly benefit the local communities and the local governments. There is a lot of topic and discussions around this nowadays, but governments will need a massive amount of investments to help finance their NDCs. Secondly, we also need the development finance institutions to step up and in deploying more concessional and blended finance capital, in particular for the early stage funding gap, and to provide more de-risking to help in crowding the financial institutions. So thirdly, we do need the financial investors, institutional investors, who can provide the long-term risk capital, including early stage funding, to help creating these next generation high quality carbon credit supply that will be required for the corporates by 2030, 2040, 2050 for their targets. But because if we don't start investing, it will be too late. Fourthly, we need the buyers, with the corporates, to provide the price signal and the continued commitment to purchase these next generation credits, high quality credits. As I mentioned, we need a higher price signal, and we need to start pricing in these additional SDG benefits such as biodiversity and gender to help make the investment case for the holistic landscape approach. And finally, we also need the regulators to step up in order to scale this market. We really need more regulation, increasing the minimum bar in the minimum standard and safeguards on the quality, but also to provide more clarity for the tax and accounting treatment of this new asset class to really build back the credibility and drive finance. So we need all of these, and we need to do them fast because we are running out of time, and I hope I'm on time. Thank you very much, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Edith. All right, I am taking note of the questions coming through, and so we will ask the speakers that at the end here, but we've got one more talk from Julia. So take us away, Julia.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you all for being here. So I'm the director of the Natural Climate Solution Alliance, which basically is a coalition that aims at catalyzing demand for high quality NCS carbon credits through the voluntary carbon market. The NCS Alliance is supported by the World Business Council, is actually hosted by the World Business Council, was co-established also with the World Economic Forum, which continues to support it, and is funded through the Win-Win Business Coalition. As I said, 80 organizations, businesses, NGOs, and solution providers form the NCS Alliance. So we are here because we are talking about nature, but also climate. And I think this image to me really solves the question about the connection between the two. Is like sometimes people talk about two sides of the same coin. No, I think it's an alloy. They are together, really together. There are two interconnected crises in nature, as also identified by the IPCC, is a huge solution, actually a very cost-effective solution to the climate crisis. After wind and power, the protection of nature, the management of nature, and then restoration of nature are the three most cost-effective solutions for climate change. So when we are talking about protect, improve, and restore, we are talking about sub-issues. So for example, protecting forests, wetlands, grasslands as well, improve management. It looks at working lands, but also timberlands and so on. And restoration is the restoration of forests and wetlands and any other ecosystems. The three types of actions actually have different cost benefits and also different opportunities. You see that basically protection is the one that is most cost effective and most immediate, with management the one that actually has more potential. And the one that actually is possibly more expensive is actually restoration. So we talked already about cost, but as we know what to do, let's get going, right? This is the amount that was invested in nature in 2019. And with the nature-based solutions, really a small part of this 124 billion. Therefore, and I'm using different stats than Edit, but basically the finance gap is huge. In this case, it's 711 billion in 2030. So with the expectation for nature to become investment in nature-based solution, a much bigger component. So the question is, what are nature-based solutions? And so here are solutions that basically solves societal challenges through protection, improved management, and restoration. So let's just think about, in societal challenges, including climate change. So, you have basically, you go from the left to the right, the protection, the improved management and restoration, addressing, you could use them for water management, poverty alleviation. But in this case, we are really focusing on climate change. So, and that's where we use the word natural climate solution. So how the voluntary carbon market can contribute. And the voluntary carbon market is one of the many ways to finance nature for climate. And here is a very popular image where we say, basically, for companies to go beyond value chain to address, and purchase carbon credits. Carbon credits originate through a long value chain of actors. But the most important actors are at the beginning are the landowners and land steward. And then there's a whole value chain of really expert, dedicated organizations that deliver high quality. So let's just focus on what are natural climate solutions, right? I always say is 1 ton of carbon, but is much more. Is 1 ton of carbon and a protected forest, a forest that delivers also benefits for people and nature. Is a 1 ton of carbon, and this is where I'm too fast. And carbon and soil and regenerated soil and high in biodiversity in soil is carbon-rich soil that also not only sequester carbon, but also delivers better agricultural products. And of course, is also recovering areas that have been degraded and creating new opportunities for people as well as the climate. And this is restoration opportunities in many different habitats. So we know basically what to do, right? And what is important now is how do we get there? And I'm waiting for the next slide. I'm going way too fast here. So as I said, natural climate solutions are not just about climate, but they're also about people and nature. This is an example of the other benefits that NCS have generated based on a sample of 19 projects that the NCS Alliance has collected. So you see the numbers are quite high in terms of livelihood provided and so on. So from a business perspective, when and how they should do this is important because we have to do everything everywhere and all at once, especially given that we have the 2030 timelines, right? We need to halve our emissions by 2030, and we have to revert the loss of biodiversity for 2030. So from a business perspective, what can you do as you want to do everything and everywhere all at once is about procurement and really looking at first how your climate strategies can include natural climate solutions, and looking at your near-term science-based targets and how much you want to compensate, counterbalance that. And then for each project you select, really going through a sequence of steps to understand the quality of the credits. Every project is different and is not a commodity. And this is the beauty of an NCS carbon credits. So the NCS Alliance, we are there also to help companies to go through these different stages and understand how to make a business case, understanding what are NCS projects, procure with integrity, diversify, so all the different stages that a company might want to go through in order to finally get to destination, which is purchasing high quality NCS credits and share their stories. So these are our contacts. We hope businesses on this call will contact us, because we can really help you convey this message internally as well, because we need really every single ton to make sure that we make a difference. So thank you very much for inviting the NCS Alliance to this session.
Thank you, speakers. That was amazing. You did an awesome job with the challenge of keeping it very fast-paced and digestible for our audience. So thank you for that. We're going to get into kind of the panel portion now. I had a few questions prepared, and I'm also just generating some ideas from the chat. So if you're in the chat, if you haven't added any questions, thoughts, comments, feel free to add them in now, and we'll try to incorporate them. So I want to actually jump right into, I guess, kind of the elephant in the room. Carly, you mentioned some of the issues that are in the mainstream media right now about carbon credits, and questioning not just the integrity, but the effectiveness, natural impacts for nature and carbon reduction. So it's been a rough summer for deforestation trends in particular. If anyone is keeping up on the news, right, there's a report that in 2022, we lost 10% more primary rainforest than the year before. And then the recent Guardian article is really questioning the validity of the carbon markets. And there's this real infighting right now, some which is healthy, and maybe some that's not so helpful. So I want to kick it to you all, just to kind of give us your thoughts. Like, with so much noise around this issue, what should buyers what questions should they be asking right now to know what they should and shouldn't invest in? And do you have any thoughts on, reasons why they should still stay in the carbon market or be looking to biodiversity credits at this point?
I can kick us off with a few thoughts, and then I have to imagine Julia has plenty to say about this, having just published a paper on it recently. So I'll just start to say that, the due diligence piece is really very important, and there's not one rule book for this yet. I'd say you really have to rely on the experts of the people that you're working with. If you're hiring consultants, if you're working with folks like us, making sure that you have a very clear lens on what's happening on the ground. This can't just be a desktop study. It's not something that's quick and easy that you can just, oh, yes, no, it's fine, it's good. You have to really dig into the details of each project beyond what maybe that project design document says. Yes, each registry has a set of criteria that you have to meet to have the project registered, but that's just not enough anymore to guarantee, or really there's no guarantee in a world where the climate is so crazy, but to make sure that you have a high level of confidence in the productive delivery of that project. And you can look out for things using criteria from the IUCN, using the core carbon principles to really layer them on top of those programs that are already existing within the carbon registry programs like ACR, VR, whatever it may be. So I'll pause there. I know, Julia, I see you writing down. I'm sure Edit's ready too. Anything to add?
Julia, do you want to?
Go ahead, Megan.
No, yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I do fully agree, and I think it was a bit of fast pace to discuss that in the Pechakucha format. But I think I agree. The market is really at a transition phase, and the media has done maybe a service to accelerate it, also disservice in certain sense to exaggerate it, but that's how it works. And I think it's really important that we do transition from the current phase to the next phase. As I mentioned, there are 800 million ton of inventories from all kind of credits, not just nature-based. There are a lot of legacy credits. Unfortunately, from the CDM Kyoto Protocol, there is also a lot that has been transitioned over, which is depressing the market. And so you really, I think from my perspective, would like to urge everybody just to vote with their, what they purchase power, and don't buy the junk. Let the junk get out of the market. We need that to stop, especially those that are already in their third crediting period or whatever. So just make your desktop first, but also, and in addition to the desktop, we fully agree that unfortunately today we are not in a phase yet where you can rely on those standards. That should be the case in the future. That's the only way to scale. But as of today, we really need to create a price signal and that case for the high quality credits and get the cowboys out of this market once for all. But it's also normal in any markets. Financial markets, other fraud is there. So we just need to strengthen the audit capacities and all the safeguards. And I think the carbon market does get singled out compared to their expectations that are way beyond than any other markets, commodities or financial markets in the whole economy. So I think the good news is that this mechanism works. If you have ever seen a project on the ground that delivers the benefits to the communities and biodiversity, you will have no doubt about it. But you need to do your homework, and I think it's extremely important right now to do the site visit, all the due diligence, and support the next round of projects that are really aspiring to use best-in-class technology and do all these additional benefits.
Let me add to this the fact that yes, these credits are not a commodity, so there is not just one system that can give the stamp to everything. It is absolutely important that any company understands, and carries out the due diligence. And this is why, a lot of the work of the NCS Alliance is focused on helping companies walking through the process of, setting up a procurement process and system, identifying the questions, identify who to work with to be able to deliver, basically carry out the due diligence. And interesting, last week we had a conference with a lot of the 15 project developers that presented their projects, and we asked them, what would you recommend a buyer to ask you? And one of the project developers said, well, what we like project buyers to come to us and ask basically the certification that we get from the registry is the minimum. They should ask more. They should ask more questions, because we are much more than just 1 ton of carbon, right? And so this is the beauty of NCS, that is much more. And therefore, in a way, you really have to add questions to your due diligence, in addition to say, is it verified by Vera or gold standard and so on. The other 2 points I wanted to make. First is that now there are also other actors in the system that are coming, and these are insurance companies, and that's great because they can also give manage part of the risk that maybe the company that buys credits does not want to take on them. So that's one. And the second point was about answering why they should do it. Is this important? These projects have especially nature and especially protection of forest, have a high level of additionality, where additionality means that they would not happen unless this funding comes to fruition. So are we ready to lose our forest? That would be the question I would ask everybody today. Some projects, as Edith said, are definitely not good. I don't think anything is perfect, but are we ready to lose our forest?
Thank you all. Just one follow-up. It sounded like from a few of your answers, I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the part of the buyer at this point, right? It's not just about a certification. There's mentioned it's not just a desktop issue. How would you advise companies to kind of start building up their staffing and their capacity to do that work on their end? Is it mostly by working, with the Alliance, or should they be staffing up in this area in a way that provides better capacity to do that work?
Let me answer this. Alex, this is a very interesting question. When we wrote our manual on the buyer's guide on purchasing high quality NCS credits. We have a whole section about, setting up a team. And, originally was expand your team. I was like, no, I mean, certain companies, very large companies might be able to set up entire new teams, but many companies will have to do what they have internally. And internally, most of the organization now, even especially, assuming that they're dealing with ESG anyway, they have teams working on nature, they have teams working on climate, they have really good teams working on procurement anyway, because they're procuring something. So it is really also an opportunity to start working together internally rather than adding a new team that works as a silos on this. It's highly cross-sectoral, and it's really an opportunity to do that. Plus, there are a lot of experts out there that could do this, then can jumpstart the company to define it. Plus, in CSA, we have a free platform for any company that wants to start learning. We won't do the procurement ourselves, but we can put in contact. There's a lot of also peer-to-peer learning that is really, I think, powerful to help companies that are starting today not to do the same mistakes that the other have done maybe in the past 10 years. So I think there are a lot of solutions without necessarily spending, creating a new department in every single company that wants to do this.
I'm still going to advocate for the chief nature officer, but that's just me.
But yeah, but is the chief nature officer that can then work also on climate, right? Across.
Yes. Absolutely.
I just want to add that, think about the skills that you need. Who is it that's working on these projects? Is it an ecologist? Is it a social performance person? I have one of each on every project I work on. I make sure to have my bases covered. I make sure to have at least one person with local knowledge of that area. And I guess we're lucky at ERM, we have a global footprint. We can do that. We have the staff capacity, but think carefully about who it is that's doing the work. And if there's a gap in that skill set, maybe you're not an ecologist, that's okay, but how can you fill that gap in a way that's going to support this work and make sure that you don't have any blind spots when you're exploring your projects? And that goes for social as well.
I think that's the perfect transition to my next question for you all. So I'm going to try to take some questions from the chat and from my own list and combine them here. So as we're thinking about these projects, how do we ensure that they're having positive impacts on local communities and that they're also taking into account the perspectives of those local communities who will deal with the impacts, whether they're negative or positive? So that's part of it. The other, I think Rebecca in the chat brought this up, and it is my favorite question to ask, but are these projects ensuring long-term sustained funding to maintain the restoration, the protection? It's not one and done, right? You don't just protect something and walk away and it stays pristine. So how are we making sure that the funding is consistent and having a positive impact on the local communities?
Great question. I'm happy to jump in. I think this is one of the most difficult one to standardize or even verify. That will be always the case. I can give a few ideas or examples. I think one of the issues which is also emerging right now, one of the big topics, is around the benefit share and revenue share. And that's, at least you can ask for the plan, and there
You lost her? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I wasn't sure if it was on my end.
Okay. Well, maybe let me not answer this one. So
yeah.
She's back. She's back.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Edit, can you hear us?
Okay.
Might need a minute if you want to jump in, Julia.
Okay, so let me answer the second part of the question, which is a really critical. I don't have the answer actually, but I can tell you that there is a lot of thinking about what is going to happen once the carbon project ends, right? So the project has a lifetime that is also linked to the monitoring and the obligation to monitor to ensure permanence and so on. But at a certain point, it will stop, right? And let's say that you have protected the forest or you have restored the forest. And then what? So very interesting, because I remember asking this question 2 years ago, and people's like, okay, we are just really now, let's focus on the voluntary carbon market. Interesting enough, last week when we had these 15 project developers presenting, at least 4 or 5 start putting that issue out, saying that they're in the middle of their carbon project, but they are starting to think about the next phase, right? So how, now that they have, secured the protection, secure the land rights, for example, for the protection, or restore the area, or in the process of restoring, how are they going to secure a different economic model so that in perpetuity the area will be protected? And at that point, it's not going to be the voluntary carbon market, because it's not additional anymore, right? So it has to be a different mindset, because otherwise we're back to square one, right? And that's something that it's so important that we start thinking about it, even if we are still in the middle of the chaos of the voluntary carbon market. We need to make sure that we also start thinking about how do we change the way we look at natural resources. How do we incorporate the cost of the protection that often is delivered by communities and indigenous peoples in every decision, from policy decisions and private sector decisions? So there is no answer, but definitely there is a question out there, and it is a really important and timely question to start thinking about, because we don't want to arrive the day before the carbon project ends to say, well, now we have no funding for the next phase.
Thank you, Julia. I'm so glad to hear that that is a topic of conversation in these spaces. Edith, you're back online. Did you want to add anything?
I'm so sorry, I get kicked out by the session. So interesting. I was about to say, maybe just to add that one of the things that helps maybe give comfort if you can't visit the project over time as we scale, one of the things we are advocating for is the use of IFC performance standards, because they are much more stringent than, although not a label like a CCB, but can be added on top of it. And at least it deals with especially performance 4 and 5, with community engagement. And I think that can give a good starting point. But as I mentioned, I think it's always important to do also the community, the visit, and then hopefully over time, again, we'll have the markets reach the standard that is required. And then on the pricing side, I think that's also key. And I was trying to explain it also in my very fast speaking slide, that I think it's key that in order to ensure permanence, it really has to embed in the local economy. So this carbon is not the end goal, it's a transition tool. It has to embed, and that's how you get permanence. And how do we get a long-term funding is that we need the buyers to keep buying these credits for the 30 year in the terms of restoration, or in RED Plus, maybe it's a bit shortening. But yeah, you need to keep buying those credits to generate the revenues, because that's the main business model for at least the initiation of the transition. And over time, after that, hopefully the economy has transformed and we don't need any more carbon finance afterwards.
Thank you all. So we've Edit, could you just mute it? There's a little echo, I think, on your end. So we've got about 1 more minute. We end the session at 1:45. So I want to end just with a kind of quick round robin here. If you could recommend one action that companies or investors could take today to have the greatest possible impact on natural climate solutions, what would it be? I'll start with Carly.
That one action. Well, I think it's understanding the data you have, the information you have, and building from it. It doesn't have to start from scratch. If it's a matter of understanding where your impact with nature is and where you can implement projects that will help support resiliency, whether it's on your own operations or whether you're supporting a project proponent, understand your baseline from a community perspective, from an ecological perspective, and build from there. But make sure you have the right people on your team to do it correctly.
Thanks, Carly. Julia?
Well, I would say make the case internally to go beyond your value chain and really purchase high quality NCS. Is basically a no regret measure, because you're really giving more opportunities for all to achieve net zero and nature positive goals by 2030, which is basically the cut here.
Thank you. And Edith?
echo that. I think is to provide a price signal for these high quality credits, high enough price signal commitment to purchase these credits when they come, and therefore help investors to invest and create these assets and transformation in the next decade.
Thank you so much to all of you. I'm just so excited to hear how these conversations are continuing. Despite some setbacks with the carbon markets, I think we're making tremendous progress on the way we talk about these things and the long-lasting impacts. And I'm just gonna throw this out for anyone who wants more on nature. Register for Bloom, our event coming up in October that we're hosting. It's focused on biodiversity. It's in person in San Jose, California. And I'll drop the link in the chat box. Thank you so much, Julia, Carly, Edit, and all of you who joined us today. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.